is Nicolas. It's on my left, on my right, but I don't know you. We will discuss two publishing projects that use web technology and free open source tools. Both are made of multiple outputs from the same content. So we have print and web publication, or print and EPUB. And for this presentation, we will focus specifically on the printed part, design with Paged.js. So thanks to the Open Publishing Fest for the proposition and the organization, particularly Julien for the music and also for the beautiful website. So we're gonna have about 1 hour of demo, and we leave time for question at the end. But we see the discussion, the chat, so you can ask something to repeat or something like that. So first, the presentation. So hi, I'm Julie, and I'm graphic designer, PhD student in graphic design and ergonomics, and also I'm part of the core team of Paged.js. So I wear like multiple hats. As you can hear, maybe I'm French. I will let Nicolas introduce himself right before he talks about the project. But just before, I want to do a quick presentation of Paged.js for people that don't know what is it. So Paged.js, it's a free and open source JavaScript library that paginates content in the browser to create PDF output from any HTML content. It's a project that is open source, free, and it's supported by Cabbage3 Lab. It's a sort of polyfile, for current browser to support some CSS module about page media and print, and I will explain this during the demo. So Paged.js offers pagination, special feature for printing or for paginate document, like for example, page number, running title, and so on. And it's really an additional script to add on your web page. You can always use everything else it's possible on the web. For example, HVG graphic, table, special script. So voila for the quick presentation. But before we look more what is Paged.js, we're going to introduce you the two projects we're going to talk about for this demo and why we choose to use Paged.js. So Nicolas is not here. Nicolas, you can start by your project.
I'm gone. So I'm gone because I'm really shy. Now I was closing the window because it was noisy outside. So.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, please.
You're present.
Let me try. So, is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm Nicolas Taffin. I'm a publisher and French publisher. So CNF Editions is a tiny publishing house that has now 17 years old. We are focused on information technologies, social, political, and ethical implications of information technologies, especially the youth users. So I'm also part of a research team at Exitu at INRIA, Paris-Saclay. It's an HCI research team. And I'm also part of the Rencontre de Lure Association. This is the choice of the heart for years now, because it's an association that's really is interested in typography. And typography, it's not only a type designers congress, but typography in a very wide and open sense. So gathering people since now more than 65 years in the south of France, in Provence, to discuss about implications of typography. So I work as a graphic designer, and and there's for me much in common between the book and UI, so user interfaces, because the book is to me one UI. Okay, so self-editions has been existing for a while now. As I told you, we have many themes and areas of interest. We translate a lot of American authors in French, like Dana Boyd, Fred Turner, and some others also. And we have different collections. So I can show you the books we make. So we have a collections that comes from the web and blogs, and some others with translation of books and information technology books, and one especially called Digital Kids, about the children and the digital implications, that we try to be critical but also very positive. And we created some pretty complicated books. When we started existing, some of them were quadrilingual, for instance, and so we had French, English, Portuguese, Spanish texts about the digital technologies. So that's not what I want to show you now. Today, I want to focus on a new collection we created, which is named Intervention in French, interventions. And it's intended as a collection of smaller books. Here they are. So you can see them here. So it's smaller books that we wanted to be, we wanted several things for these collections. We wanted to be able to publish pretty fast books about themes or that have some implications in the news also. So the first one we published, Addiction sur ordonnance. So Addiction on Prescription is about the opioid crisis in the US, and it's a long article of Patrick Raddenkeefe that we translated in French, and we joined a few French texts on these books. So we wanted a kind of light workflow and a way to vary actors making the book, so that we can all work on the book, and not only, you know, the graphic designer with the Adobe InDesign license in his supercomputer, so that other people with other platforms can participate in the making of the book also. And we wanted also free software. So this collection was designed to be built with only free software. So for that, for instance, that book was made on Linux. The cover was made with Inkscape, which is a free software. And for the page layout, we wanted to experiment. So we tried, I tried a few workflows. I will show you more about that. And these workflows were all based on free software. In the end, I discovered Paged.js, thanks to my friend Julien and Julie. And so I wanted to give it a try. I was a really newbie, so it was not that easy for me to start, but they kicked me up so I could start, and it was okay after a few workarounds. I will explain you a bit later. So also, we wanted the book to be made of recycled material, and we wanted to provide an EPUB, so another publication for the same book. And the EPUB that would be cheap and with no DRM, as we always do, because we we think reading is not consuming books. Reading is intended for producing sense and sharing. So we think that it's really important that the book are open. So we have a fair publishing license we created also, which is all our books are based on this license. So we can talk about that later, or maybe in the questions at the end. So just a quick tour of the workflows, and I will stop there for now, and I'll come back later. So you can see our books were made for a long time. So now the book is a technique that is pretty old. So it's more than 500 years old, and it has a lot of knowledge and a lot of implications and expectations also. So for a long time, the books were made like that. It's really interesting because this is a composing stick. It's really simple. It's the bare bones of typography. It's the line of text. And one thing that we had to deal with is the web browser we rely on does not handle this line of text very well, because you cannot address or access the letter nor the word, only paragraphs or line or inline spans, but not at the letter level. So it's funny to see how the technologies are always have to deal with techniques or expectations that are pretty old and pretty high, in fact, because the typography is really a world of high expectations. So this is another tool that is the Gallet. The Gallet doesn't fit exactly the reflowable format. So Julie will explain you a bit more about that, but the web browser is based on the flow of text, and the width is variable and the height is infinite, potentially infinite. So, which is not the case of the book. The book is a 2 pages space. So we have to also to deal with that. And in the end, the type bed, the marbre en français, the type bed, is something that is really interesting because Paged.js provide that. So you can work in your web browser as you would be on desktop publishing software. So just to recap quickly, the workflows we mostly use is based on the word processors, because the authors love word processors. Most of the time they don't know really how to use them, but they love them, and it's hard to get something else than a Word file as a manuscript from an author. And most of the time, the editor at the publishing house use a desktop publishing software, like for instance InDesign. There are a few others, like the old Quark Express, for instance, and that is still in the game, I think, and also the open source Scribus. And most of the time, we prepare some print output. At some point, you can also export. That's what we do traditionally here from InDesign HTML, because we use style sheets, and it's pretty okay to get an EPUB, but it's a lot of work, and it takes some time. I worked with another workflow, and some of our books are made with this workflow. Just for information, the name is Metopes. Metopes is an XML-based workflow that relies on the TEI, Text Encoding Initiative. And it's very interesting because the idea behind Metopes is to get an expression that is stable. So you have a pivot or a core file that is made from the processing of the word processor file, especially with style sheets that prepare the tagging. And once it's tagged and corrected, you have something like a perennial and interoperable file that you can use to import in InDesign through a set of scripts that automate the process, and also to other manifestations like the EPUB or HTML or many others. But this workflow is very interesting for us, but it's a bit more heavy, and it's a bit it's also a bit constraining And that's not exactly what we wanted for this collection. So I turn to Paged.js. Paged.js allows to keep the word processor entry we have from the authors, but we can process other sources like Markdown or others. The important thing is now the expression, so the core file, more or less, is HTML. And so we can edit it in a code editor and preview it in a web browser. And then from there, we can prepare PDF, which will be printed in the industry, like by our printer, as usual, as a desktop publishing output file, but also an EPUB. So for the EPUB, we use Sigil. I will give you a bit more details. So for this collection, that's what we choose to use. And for the cover, I introduced Inkscape because it was more easy to draw the visuals and organize the space of the double page of the cover. But then we relied on word processor, HTML editor, web browser, and Acrobat for the output post-processing. I will explain you a bit more about that later. And Sigil for the processing of the EPUB. So just to recap, the media book for us is a set of challenges. Simple text, so a textbook, really a textbook with nothing special is never as simple as we think. Typography has high expectations that are invisible to many, but not to all, and you can do some nice work if you want to. So it's a long tradition of expectations and requirements. We try to deal with that. And the book also is a 3D object. And you have to prepare this 3D object in a 2D media, like on the screen. And the book is a finite world. It's, it has a beginning and an end. It has a front cover and a back cover, and it's not a reflowable medium. So we can work on it with these reflow-oriented tools, but we have to take care of a few things. And once more, simple text is never as simple as we think. So that's my first presentation. Maybe I can hand it over to Julie.
I need to be presenter.
Yeah, let me try to do that. Oh, you are.
Yeah. So for the demo, the project I want to talk with you is a project made for a museum in Toulouse in France, the Saint-Raymond Museum. I put in the chat the link. If you want to see. Yes. So the museum has a collection of ancient sculptures that were all discovered in the same place, the Villa Chiragon. And the museum asked to Antoine Fauchier and I to create a workflow to publish a book and create a digital and printed book about the Villa Chiragon. So the idea of the digital catalog is to provide like a view of the collection and make it available in the public domain, all the text, all the images of the sculpture. So it's placed under a free license because also the town Toulouse have an open data policy for the town. Sorry, it's for my cat. All the image and metadata of the work can be downloaded from the digital catalog. For example, it's when you go here, you can download all the data and all the images here. And you can also download when you are in a sculpture. You can download here the image. So each sculpture have detailed notice, bibliographical elements, and a lot of images in high resolution, so you can zoom, for example. And for the printed part, it's more for like general public. It's not all the detail of each sculpture. It's just a selection which is designed specially for print. So the project was inspired by a choir of the Getty Museum. It's a publishing tool, a publishing workflow, morely, to create printed and digital catalog. And I see Greg Albers is here. Hi. And we choose, but for the Village Aragon, we choose to develop our own. Yes, our own workflow. So this is a graphic of our workflow. It's very complicated, and for several reasons, we need to have like bibliographical references for a big text expert, and we have also the HTML is different from the digital part of the book and the printed part. So we don't use Quire, but our own workflow, and we have Jekyll for the generation of the HTML file. We use GitLab to have the code and a lot of things. But I don't have the time to explain this. And today we'll focus on the printed part of the catalog. So this part, I choose to use Paged.js for this part, obviously, because I'm part of the development team, and this book is like a good use case, and there is a lot of images in high resolution, and I also want to show that Paged.js is not only made for textbook, and that you can make layout more complex. So it's a good use case for this. So first, we can see how to use Paged.js in a general way and how it works. So this is what I have when I don't have a style of my HTML on my browser. And if I want printed this, I can go here and print it. It's on all browser. You can do that on all browser. And yeah, it's a long. So you have your pages. But you want a style sheet different in the digital part of your book and in your printed part. So to do that, you can use the media queries. So media queries, it's something like this. In your CSS, you say @mediaprint is, and you can see here I have my text in green, and it's only when I print that I have the green color. So finally, print is like a variant of responsive web. Julien like to say that, so I like this too. But if you print the page directly, there is it's not a good layout, because you need special feature and special layout for the pagination. So there is CSS syntaxes for this, written by the W3C. It's, for example, like this. Here it's to create a page number. But if you write only this and you print, you can see there is no page number. So it's why you use Paged.js. Paged.js is really made to read this CSS, transform it, and so you can use the specification of W3C. So like I say, Paged.js is really a polyfill. and we use this CSS module to lay out the page. So we are based on standard of W3C. So now I can show you here. Sorry, I'm not in the good place. So in this page now I had the Paged.js script. Here I had it. Only this. And now you can see the page number here and here. And there is also the page number when you print. And you can print on your printer, but you can also download this file on PDF format for a professional printer, for example. So now I can show you the real style of the book. The book is like this. If you want to see it on your own browser, I can link you on the chat here. So maybe it's different on your browser because I developed this book on Chrome with Mac OS, and this is very specific because, for example, the lineage is different from browser to another, the hyphens too. So when maybe if you open on Firefox, for example, it doesn't work. Me, I have an infinite rendering when I open it on Firefox. So you need to choose carefully your browser when you choose to develop a book. But we can discuss that later in the discussion. So now we can go to the code of the layout. So this is just a little code. This is the basic of Paged.js here. First, you declare the page, the size of the page, and the margin of your page. You can use inch, millimeter, and even pixel for margin, for example. And you can have also left and right pages, for example, to change the margin, to have like a mirror, a symmetrical layout. So you can say the distinction with this pseudo class. And there is also a lot of pseudo class defined by the W3C to choose your page. For example, here is to choose the, a specific page. So page 5, for example, or here to choose the first page. So it's like to improve your design. Okay. So now we can have generated content in the margin. When a page is created, a lot of it's defined a lot of margin boxes is area like this. So you can select one area to put your content inside. For example, I want to have my pages on bottom right, so I choose the margin box at bottom right. And it's what I do here in the right page. I choose the bottom right, and I put a special contour for page number. And here is some style too to improve the style. And you can see variable, CSS variable, CSS. You can use CSS variable if you want. You can have also a running title, but there is no running title in the example I show you. But if you want running title, is for example here, I say all my H2 are a string set named title, and I want to have this title on the bottom center of the right page, and I call the string title. It's like a variable. Each time you have H2 in your DOM, the string is changed, and you have just to write these 2 lines to have all the running title of your document. So after the page break, here, this long part, you have different way to force the page break of your content. You can break before or after a fragment. You can also specify if you want it to start on the next page or on the next right page. For example, here I want to start my table of contents on the right page. Here I want to start all my parts on the right page. If you look at my HTML, the structuration of the HTML is important for the break, and also to define later template from a section. If you want a different template, for example, on this section, a front matter, for example, and here a template for the part. So you need to think of this if you do the structuration of the HTML. And when you have, you can also avoid the break. For example, here it's to avoid break inside table. I don't have table in my book, but it's an example. And here, break after avoid, it's to avoid a break just after a title, to don't have a break, title in the hand of the page. But when you do a break in the right, for example, maybe your content don't finish on the left page, so you have a blank page at just before. So you can also target the blank page with this code. And for example, here I don't want to have the generated content on my margin boxes, so I say content none. And to finish on this global overview, you can also have name-made page. So what is name-made page? It's to create a sort of template of section of your book. So for example, you need a special layout to have a different background or a different margin or different generated content on your page. So you can use name-made page to define this. And it's based on your HTML. For example, for all this part, I define that is a template called front matter, so page front matter. And after, you create also a specific add page rule with the same name, so it's a name page. And where you create new properties. Here, it's just to delete the generated content, but for example, where is my version? For example, if I want, I can put a different background. So here, for the apropos, I don't have a different background, but if I say, yeah, I want a different background, yeah, you can see now, this is a different background for the front matter page. And after, it's a normal page, so it's white again. And you can see here, this is because the book is generated, so you can see on the table of contents where is the book. So I think, okay, I think I've finished for this global tour, and I will discuss after more specific layouts and how to do more complex thing. But before, I will let Nicolas speak about the code of his book. So Nicolas, yeah.
So your book is so nice. I'm looking forward to see more. So I'll take the screen back. So I'll just get a bit deeper in the project of this book, which was the first one in the collection. So the first thing I did is trying different software. So I kind of used traditional desktop publishing software to research or specify a bit more what I was looking for. And it helped me. It helped me because I could, with this kind of specification, I could test it with different software. I even tried with OpenOffice and to see how far can we go in the control of the font and text of the book. So this book was pretty simple. I neither have running heads, for instance, but I had a few footnotes, which was an issue, in fact, with Paged.js. But I got some help from Fred, Jason, and Julien, and later even Julie helped me to handle the notes. And so we switched to the section notes for the project, which was not a big deal. So now you can see the working environment is a bit different from the InDesign, and Julie showed you. So this is the code editing. So on the left, on the very left, I have my files here, and on the left, I have my HTML. So maybe for the people who don't know, the HTML describes the structure of the text. So it's a tagging system that allows you to wrap up chunks of text and say what's the status of this text and its function in the document. But there's absolutely no visual attributes in the HTML. So for instance, here you have a title. This title is a H2. It has a class that says it's a faux titre in French, and that's it. So there's no font, there's no size, there's no color. So to specify the size, colors, and visual attributes, we use another language, which is CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. And this allows you to create selectors. This is another class, and to specify a few properties and values that set attributes. For instance, the font family, the font size, etc. And that's the interesting point with Paged.js is I have my preview that I can refresh live, and so I can specify my font size or anything and have a look because I'm used to it. So I have a look in the web browser, and Paged.js shows me a kind of double page here with all the attributes and structure merged. So this is the environment for the cover. So it's Inkscape. It's pretty more traditional also. So I will be very quick on this one. Paged.js is a polyfill, as Julie said, to enable you to use what CSS planned, but which was not really finished and polished in the web browsers. So the setup is just installing a JavaScript file. And also you need to gather a few things like the fonts you want to use. In my collection, I picked 3 fonts, 3 software fonts. So it's Zilla Slab from Peter Blanc, which is a great type designer, and also Chunk5 for the titles from Meredith Mandel. You have to double check also that your font supports a few characters like special spaces we use in the publishing, at least the non-breaking space, which is very useful, especially in French, but also some maybe punctuation spaces that are thinner, and we use a lot in French. So I'll skip this one because Julie explained you. I just specified my pages attributes like the size, the margins, etc. And I also specified a few generated content rules, but very few. So the folio one I'll skip also because Julie explained it. I had some white pages also, but this one is maybe interesting I focus on because I think it's my job today. So the generated content can also help you to build a table of contents pretty quickly. So here you can see the HTML part of it. Sorry. The HTML part just contains for me some paragraphs with anchors that lead to some sections. The section is later in the book, the part I'm focusing on. So it's a link, like the links we are clicking on the web. And this is the text that you can read on the link. But on the CSS part of it, I specified using the generated content syntax that I wanted to the anchors that are located in the table of contents to have an element that added after them that says the word page, and also that tries to locate later what is the real page in the compiled book and to add the number there. So for instance, you can see my table of contents here. No, it doesn't work. Oh, wait a sec. Yes, it's here. So in my book, okay, so that's the result of it. So you can see in my HTML, I only have the title, and this is generated by Paged.js through this CSS rule. So if you have questions, we can maybe answer you later. So I wanted, as the time is running short, I wanted to focus on two big constraints of the book. So the first one, I'd call it the vertical constraint. So you can guess which one will be the next one. So the vertical constraint can be summarized with the baseline grid. So the book is printed on paper, and the paper has many advantages, but sometimes it has a weakness that is a bit transparent. So for a long time, printers have been struggling against this weakness, and the best thing they invented was to print characters exactly on the front side, from the back side, exactly behind the characters from the front side. So you never see them with the transparency because they are hidden by the black print, the black of the ink. So this is very common for the book making, but you have to deal with that when you're coding and when you're using the web browser as an engine. So one thing that's really useful with Paged.js is that you can specify a variable for the line height, and then you can base all your positioning on this variable. So as Julie said, the problem is the line height is a bit different between different browsers, but if you stick to the same browser, you can, with the eye, approach what you want and then stick to it, and it's okay, it's reliable. It also can help you absolute positioning. So instead of specifying pixels or anything, any unit, then you can use your variable as a unit and calculate with the calc feature of the CSS, calculate multiples of your line height. So everything in the book is positioned using a multiple of my line height. That ensures me that all my lines are always synchronized between the left and the right page. They are not mismatching, but also between the, of course, between the front and the back, which ensures the traditional syncing of the lines. So that's really helpful. I know also Paged.js has a feature that allows you to see kind of grid lines to help you. That can be helpful at some point. I must admit I forgot how to do it, so I can't demo it, but that's important. Another constraint, of course, with the book is the text justification. So you can justify text, but it has some weaknesses. And I wanted to highlight this constraint because we worked a lot around this, because I wanted to make a small book. So the weakness of the small book is the column of text counts few characters, or fewer than, of course, large books, except if you have several columns. And so it's complicated. It's a bit complicated to have a nice justification in a small column, so with a small number of characters on a web browser. I showed you the tools of the traditional typographer, and you saw that or maybe you know that the typographer add spaces by hand between words, but also between characters if needed. And they had many, many different spaces they can insert to have this nice justified column that is aligned left and right. So the desktop publishing software justification engines are now pretty good, especially because InDesign introduced, and that was his killer feature when it appeared, the paragraph-based justification algorithm, which does not justify line by line, but that tries to make also the paragraph, the global paragraph, looks nice. You also, to have a nice justification, you need to hyphenate. Long words must be cut. And so the problem is that hyphenation also has some limitation in the web browser, especially when you want to control it. So you can have an hyphenation, but you have to rely globally on what the developers made. So in Chrome, on the Macintosh, you can have a hyphenation engine. But as I told, I used Linux and Chromium, and there was no hyphenation engine. So I had to rely on Hyphenator, which is a third-party hook, which is pretty good. So you can add it as an additional library. And then to control, I had to use a no hyphen spans I had in the word I wanted not to be cut, like I don't remember, but like some nouns and some words. And also I didn't want to separate, for instance, the first from the last name or something like that. Also, I wanted to add that the Windows offense management, I think, is okay in Chrome, but it's not the case in every web browser, so you have to be careful with that. So you see the horizontal management is pretty complicated because you don't have access to the letter, you don't have access to the word. So you can specify any CSS or anything, any class to the word, except if you add some elements in the HTML using spans, but it can be pretty fast, a lot of them. So just for you to compare, I have the same, not the same page, but two pages. So on the left, you can see the result of the InDesign justification engine, and on the right, what you get with the web browser. So we have a few problems here, and we tried to manage that, but it was not that easy to manage it globally with the CSS. So the idea is not to fully automate things, but the idea was to get a pretty stable result. So I just wanted to highlight these two very important and maybe sometimes unknown, at least from non-publishers, of course, unknown expectation we have just when we are composing text. There are many others, but I think I was pretty confident with the CSS. I like CSS, and I like the way you can specify many attributes. So I think it's pretty good, but with some limitations. So maybe I'll get back later. I don't know if we'll have time. So, but I want Julie also to be explaining things about that.
I need to be the presenter to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay. No.
It's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I forgot an important part of Paged.js. It's, you see the pages as a spread because I had a little CSS here. It's not too long. It's a CSS you can find in the documentation on the website of Paged.js, paged.org. It's just to facilitate the view of the book. And like Nicolas said, you can see the baseline too with this little code. It's on some of my projects. So if I had it here, you can see no a baseline. It's just a visual one, but it helps you. And like Nicolas, I use variable of the line 8 to have my text on the baseline and also my images and all the elements of the book. So this is just a precision. But no, I want to, before go further, I want to inspect with you just the book, for example, here. Yeah. And as you can see, you have a lot of things on this page. It's because Paged.js had div or element to build the layout. And it's not added in your original HTML, but it's just for the rendering. And we use a lot of CSS layout facility to build the layout. For example, if you go to this page, or the page sheet, no, the page box, yeah. On the page box, you can see we use grid to have, yeah, you can see the grid here, to have the margins, for example. So this is how Paged.js work. Here it's an example how we deal with the margin box. This is a grid, and in the grid there is a div with flexbox. And Paged.js, in reality, Paged.js translates your CSS to be readable by a browser. So the pages are, in fact, special div with classes. So, for example, add page is transformed in these classes. And here, the bottom left is transformed here. So this is how Paged.js work in the base. And Paged.js also had, like here, a lot of data on your element. For example, here we can see that the section it's the second part of the section, because on the first page we have another one that have data split to or data split from. So you can explore your DOM to see how it's built. And it's very important because you with this you can go very beyond the possibility of the CSS of the standard. And you can use also the variables that Paged.js use, like, for example, the page area here. You can see, not this page area, page box. You can see the width of the page box is a variable. And with this, you can build a lot of things. And I want to show you how I can build with this a plain page image, a full page image, for example, here or here. Not really full page because it's specific design. But in my code, when I go, where is it? Oops. So all the figure of my notice, so I said the width of my figure is actually the width of my page box created by Paged.js plus bleed, because when I had bleed on my page, I want to have the image on the bleed too. And the height is the same. The height of my image is the height of my page box minus margin bottom here, because I want to have this, sorry, where is it? This space here. But you need also to position your image because when you don't have the position, the image is in the content. So if, sorry, it's long because I have a lot of high quality images here. But when you have a textbook, it's really fast. Yeah, you can see here it's a full page image, but it starts when you inspect, and it starts on the div content. So I want to move it to have it on the page. So it starts here, and yeah, you can see the margin around. So to have a full page image, I need to say that I want to have my image at the top minus the margin top and the bleed. So it's how I, for example, I build plain images. I use this trick also for the page title here, as you can see. But for page title, I had div with background color. They are positioned in absolute and or the width of the page, but there is often several ways of doing things. It's up to you to figure out your way, your design. For example, for the title page, I could have used the name it page with a color in the background. But here, since I want to have this white space at the bottom, I prefer to add a div element. But also, another part important of this book is this. It's like a lot of pages with images and with like caption. And to build this, yeah, I had a grid to have like a rhythm of my image. And so each figure is contained in a div. For example, I can show you the HTML. For example, in part 2, no, this is part 1. I'll show you part 2. In part 2, no, this is not this, sorry. Yes. So I have a grid, I have a div, which is a grid with a figure and with a caption. So I apply CSS grid on this element. This is here. So I apply a grid with a grid template. And my grid, like you see, it's based on the baseline of my document, sorry. So if I go, yes, for example, this page, if I go here, you can see the grid. Sorry, my computer, yeah. I want to see the grid. Yeah, you can see it. So for each image, I choose, for example, here, for this image, I choose, no, this is a plain page image. Yeah, for this image, this figure, I choose to have my image from column 4 to the end of the column, and there is a row too. And I also choose to do like a zoom in the image, so I use the overflow when it overflows the grid part, and I move it with top and left. If I inspect this one, and I use a lot of the inspector, because for example here I can see directly, and I move it to have the correct image that I want. so I use it a lot. And for the caption, I use the property that's called transform. It's here. I rotate the caption, and I use also the grid to place the caption. So this is very specific work of design. It's not developed to be a template, a generic template, for example. This is because for this book, we really want to have specific work about the images. And so also the HTML is very specific. It's not like to have an automated workflow. And I don't think we have the time, but just it's an example to show you that a lot is possible if you go to further to how Paged.js work. And we have also that we call handlers and hook. It's for to run a specific script in a specific moment of the rendering of the book. For example, you can use after page layout to do something after each rendering of each page. So you can improve the design with a little script I use it for the book. I use it, for example, for full page because I want my full page image in the middle of the text. So you need a little script to do that. But we have a repo in the GitLab pagemedia.org. So it's the GitLab for the Paged.js development. We have a repo named experiment, and you can find a lot of little scripts to improve your design. So I encourage you to go here, for example, repeating table header, or for create automatic table of contents. And we have also margin maps. So that's it for me. So Nicolas, if you want to talk about maybe pre-press, I don't know if we have the time or we go to the question.
Yeah, we're a bit late, but yeah, maybe I can just show a few things about the final output and conclude maybe.
Sorry for the question on the chat, we'll respond later.
Okay, so I think we're good. So, so Julie, yeah, you wanted me to explain a bit about these pages. So I like the way we can play with the double page, of course, and maybe to have some content crossing the pages with the constraint that the book, as you can see, is a 3D object with the binding that eats some paper also. So this one shows you, this double page shows you that I could position some text on the left page and on the right page. So it's a very simple trick. I just cut the text, and I added some classes to space a bit because I wanted really to have the words feeling like, you know, you can read it even in the gap between the pages. And also I used absolute positioning here at the bottom for the author bio, and so the text grows up here, and so I could sync the heights of left and right. So it's pretty simple with the, as I explained you, with the grid and calculation based on the grid line height. So I think, Julie, you wanted me also to insist that as it's a printed material, so the images you can see there are not low-res web pictures, of course. So if you inspect or if you open the image, you can see there it's a high-res image. But the thing that is a bit tricky is the web browser lives in the RGB color space. So that's how it's made, because it's for the web, and we are tricking it to make printed things. So this book was black or gray, so it needs converting, because even the output PDF is RGB based, and so the colors are really not handled at the same time. So the black, the RGB black, if you output it directly, has three colors inside when it's moved in the ink space. So you have to focus the black on the black ink only, and not on the others. So you can, to do that, you have to do a bit, I had at least to do a bit of PDF post-production. So the PDF post-processing was made with a professional tool like Acrobat, which was, I think, the only escape I made from my rule of using only free software. And the bleed was not handled, nor crop marks at the time, but I think now we have crop marks in the Paged.js. So for the next book, I may produce the crop marks with the Paged.js. But so that was two important post-production things to do for the printed, like adding crop marks. I didn't have bleed because my book had margins, and there's no full-size pictures. But I had to convert a few images from RGB to black, which was pretty simple, a pretty simple use case also. So you can convert rather precisely colors using Acrobats. The dialogues are a bit tricky and complicated to handle, but it's okay, you can do it. And also we have this EPUB output. So for the EPUB, really, it's really much simpler than usual, because the book is, as you know now, encoded in HTML, and luckily HTML is the format that is embedded in EPUB. So in fact, I just had to split my chapters in several files, and I use Sigil because it helps handling, when you import files, it handles special files like manifest and automatic table of content and many things. So, and I removed, of course, the paged attributes and all the page features of my CSS, but I kept most of my CSS specification, which I tweaked a bit, but it was okay. And of course, this time I optimized my images and embedded my fonts, but as they are free software fonts, it's not an issue to embed them in an EPUB. You have to double check your font license allows you to embed it in an EPUB before you do that. So, and we refined a bit the metadata, because we like to add some precious information in the metadata. And so that's it. For me, the collection now has its own life. We have 3 books, and we are preparing two others soon. And I'm also planning to prepare different collections based on Paged.js workflow, because we like it. And so we want to make a fiction collection also, and also maybe a bit more illustrated collection using this workflow. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Nicolas. I want just to add about the processing of the PDFs, that, for example, my images are RGB, but I'm in the discussion with the printer, so it's the printer that does the conversion. He just need to have the PDF. And the main problem is more about the color of the text or SVG element, for example. And he asked to me to say, for example, when you see this hexadecimal color, transform it to this CMGN, or even in this spot color, because all the brown you see in my book is a spot color, a pattern. And Yeah.
No, I wanted to, just to underline that that we have a color composing is pretty tricky with the profiles and lights and shadows, but also there are really precise rules for the color superposition, for the ink superposition. Like if the black ink is on a clear background, then you don't have to remove the black from the color. It's just superimposed. But if it's a darker color, then you have to remove some colors but keep some bleedings. So I mean, the color management in printing is really, really high tech, and so I think.
Yeah, we need a lot of discussion with the printer when you do the book. And also, last thing, you see Paged.js in a browser, but we have also a command line version if you want to generate the PDF in a more automatic way and do it on your automatic workflow. So that's it. And if you have questions, is the time now. You can put it on the chat or just ask it. Yeah, like Julien said, you can unmute yourself. Any use of Paged.js for other print matters, such as poster? For me, you don't need to have Paged.js to do a poster, because Paged.js is really about paginate content. So a poster, you don't have multi-pages. So you can do a poster in CSS only directly in CSS. And in fact, the add page size is supported in Chrome with those Paged.js. And it's the only browser that supports, so you can do a big page. What are the next steps for both of you? For me, it's to be in, it's to have footnotes in Paged.js. So continue to developing Paged.js. And I'm also do a thesis, so it's I don't have the time now to do projects like Village Dragon, for example, but I really focus on developing Paged.js with the user. And Nicolas, let you.
Yeah, no, for us, I'd like to stabilize and to make things really reliable in the text composing. I mean, to have rules that are really matching the way we want our typesetting to be done, which is pretty close now. So I want to keep working on that. And I want to try others layouts and introduce more complexity in the layout now with images, because we are getting a bit more confident. But I'm really, as I said, I was really a newbie, so so Julie has the knowledge, and I'm just playing and trying things, but I'm not always very sure. But it's okay, we can handle that, and we have a way to make more complicated books.
Yeah, and I put the footnote discussion in the chat because we are in the way to have it. So I think it's a big step for Paged.js.
Yeah, we made some compromise because we really wanted to move on with Paged.js and to use it. So footnotes was one compromise, but we tried hard before, and we were pretty close, but not really. And but I know the team is working hard on that because it's important. So I guess soon we can have something better about that.
Yeah, and margin note is much easier in Paged.js. So you can have margin note if you want. And there is a script in the experiment repo. I put the link. So if you want to try the script, I developed this script this weekend, so it's a new script. Is the HTML in the workflow generated from a Markdown source file? So in my workflow, yes, because first it's generates with Jekyll. So it's a special workflow. I can share screen. It's a special workflow we built specifically for the museum. So in the center, you have Jekyll. So the Markdown file come from forestry because the people who develop, the people who write the text need an interface. So we link forestry to Jekyll via the GitLab repo. But yes, it's Markdown. And we have two different templates for the digital book, digital publishing, and for the printed book. And Nicolas, I don't think it's Markdown.
Yeah,
it's
no, it's not Markdown. So we tried a lot of, we have a lot of source files, and we even have an author that writes in XML with his own schema. So it's, but we had no author using Markdown except me. Sometimes I use a bit Markdown, but not. It's not a big issue to convert to the correct HTML. So I don't see a problem here. The problem is more with Word and OpenOffice files, because we really have a lot of transformation, because we really rely on style sheets from the beginning to the end. So from the Word to the EPUB, all is based on style sheets for us. So we often get into the files, Word files, to introduce the style sheets that help us through the process. With the same class names, of course. The class names are the same from the word processor to the EPUB.
Any more questions?
Yeah, other questions? So.
Yeah. People still writing.
You can unmute if you want.
Hi.
Hi.
So it's Julian. I work on Paged.js too, and I wanted to add that starting from mid-June, we'll propose tutorials, listen, time to discuss things for 2 hours a week. I don't exactly know how we're going to do that, but the idea is that we get a Jitsi room or a big blue button, and everybody can just come in if want to talk about Paged.js and show some example of our questions. I think that the Nico, in your presentation, you got the old link for the documentation for Paged.js.
Oh, sorry.
So be sure to go to the paged.org page, and you can follow on Twitter page_JS. And this is the only way to know exactly when we're gonna do those tutorials and events, and in French, in English, and any languages that we can talk. And one last thing is that I think we need to say that we have a Mattermost for Paged.js. I will put the link in the chat so you can join and say hi. And thanks. I'll leave back to Julie and Nico. We're great presenters.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you.
And there is, Timothy asked if there is other cool example of Paged.js. In the Mattermost, we have a good community, and people post example of work. I can choose one. No, but Paged.js is used for book, but also to build workflow. For example, Romain Lazure used Paged.js in Paged.js to do document with R Markdown. So Paged.js have Paged.js, and there is I can find it. I don't have my. In fact, we really need to have more examples of book. Like we have a lot of examples of tools, but we need also a lot of examples of book made with Paged.js. So encourage people to share with us in the Mattermost. So thanks all.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe it's time to separate now.
Yeah. So thank you for being there. And we have also a Twitter account. We have Mattermost. You have pages.org with a lot of articles. So we are around, and you can ask everything you want. And if you want to ask Nicolas, you can say also, hey, Nicolas, someone say hello from the Mattermost, for example.
Yeah. And I'm also on Twitter, and through the website, you can contact us if you want to know more about the books.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.